Hello people in my phone, welcome to my gothic winter reading vlog. The second that I hit midnight on October 31st and said it's actually November now, Christmas has been in the back of my mind and I just really want to do a wintry Christmas prep reading vlog. Today is Monday, November 10th and it's my busiest day of class and I've got my newspaper meeting this evening. I'm also doing my book club today with my friends, so we're going to talk about Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, and I'm going to hopefully post tonight a review both on my Instagram and my TikTok of Rebecca. And then after my newspaper meeting I'm coming back to my flat and we're going to put up a Christmas tree in the kitchen. I've got some other Christmas plans for this week. We're hopefully going to a Christmas market. I'd like to decorate my room for Christmas a little bit, and we're also going on a study day at some point. And then of course alongside those plans I've got a massive TBR, so I'm going to run through this with you. I'm going to start with my current read, which is If We Were Villains by Emil Rio. This is my third time reading this book. I'm currently on page 236 and I adore this book so much. I know I've said it before in terms of Babel by R.F. Kuang, but sometimes some books will feel so familiar and they'll feel like coming home, and this book is exactly that for me. This book is genuinely the perfect book for me, which I know I've also said before about Catabasis, I think, by R.F. Kuang, but genuinely If We Were Villains is my book. I think If We Were Villains and maybe The Starless Sea are the two books that I would say I base my entire identity on. This is the first time I'm rereading a book that I've annotated, and I thought my annotations were more intelligent than they actually are. But still, the intimacy is there. I'm not only having a conversation with the book or the characters, but also a conversation with myself, which feels a little bit strange, but I am quite enjoying it. I just adore this book so much and I'm so happy that I've managed to find the time to get to it. And then I've timed this perfectly for my university course because I'm currently reading Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. I actually had my lecture on this play this morning and I've got my seminar on Thursday and I haven't done the required reading for it. Much like Frankenstein, like I said in my last reading vlog, I have read Romeo and Juliet before, but it was in the same sort of time as Frankenstein. I remember this one much less. Of course, I know what happens in Romeo and Juliet, but the individual steps and the character arcs, I don't really remember the plot much. I honestly almost cried in my lecture and almost cried again writing my notes into my book and typing my notes up on my computer. Tragedy will just always get me. It's one of my favourite things in literature. It's what I love to write about as well. And I feel like I can really tell this book is going to be something I hold very dear once I finish all of my annotations and finally have finished reading it. The books that first came to mind when I thought about filming this vlog is The One Dark Window, Two Twisted Crowns duology by Rachel Gillig. This duology I feel is quintessential gothic wintry vibes. And because I loved The Night and the Moth, I'm so excited to get to this duology. It's been really rainy today and I think that's supposed to continue over the course of the next few days, so I would be so excited to finally get to this duology. And finally I've got two little Penguin Black classics that I've said are on my TBR I think for a couple of months now. Firstly, Only Dull People Are Brilliant at Breakfast by Oscar Wilde. I would like to read this at some point with my breakfast and kind of just take a slow morning. And then also Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke, I think is how you pronounce his name. I'm doing a poetry module this semester and I've got 2 assignments due, one of which is due on Friday. So if I can consider myself a young poet, I feel like this would be a very important book to read. I'm hopefully going to get to this at some point before my assignment is due. So those are the 6 books I've got on my TBR. I'm about to get ready and go to another lecture, which is funnily enough on poetry. And then I've got my book club, my newspaper meeting, and then we can do some Christmas decorating together, which I'm beyond excited for. Hello people in my phone. I didn't film anything yesterday because I was honestly like sad, and I don't know, when I get sad I don't really want to talk. But the other thing that happens is like I just revert to intense nostalgia. So to make myself feel better I put on my like favourite outfit from last academic year and I went to the library with Oscar and Connie, who you saw. We worked on our poetry assignments and I finished mine, so I might submit that later on today. And And then in the evening, me, Connie and one of our flatmates that we're friends with, we done a hear me out cake because Connie made some cinnamon rolls. It was my first time trying cinnamon rolls and I really liked them. And then we just sat and we read for a little bit and it was just a really nice evening. I managed to finish 2 books last night. So I started and finished Letters to a Young Poet all yesterday because we worked on our poetry assignment in the library. I was hoping that this would give me some kind of inspiration, but really I think this is going to be more useful for my portfolio assignment because that is writing poems and I feel like that is the bit that I struggle with the most. I have got one poem that I wrote in my lecture on Monday that I would like to edit, maybe to become a sonnet if I can think of a couple of other stanzas to put in, but that's something I'll edit in the next few weeks. I've also just got to write, I think I need 6 poems to submit and I've got 1 prose poem so far. So I feel like I should probably start writing some more poetry. That's going to be a goal of mine over the next couple of weeks. I really enjoyed this. I was expecting it to be more on inspiration. I think it was more on learning how to live as a poet. There were a lot of very beautiful quotes in this that I'm going to post on TikTok, I think. And I love when books like this have got quotes that really stand out against the rest of the text and it just hits you, you know? I think the one quote in this that stands out the most in terms of recognizing poetry is on page 24 of the Penguin Little Black Classic, and it's, "But there is a great deal of beauty here because there is beauty everywhere." And I think that is so important for me to remember going into my poetry, that I don't have to internalize emotions and write poetry about myself. I can write about anything. I do wish that I was a better poet, and I'm hoping that this portfolio assignment will help me kind of find my narrative voice in poetry and figure out what I like and don't like in terms of writing my own poetry and see if that correlates with the type of poetry that I like to read. But either way, I thought this was quite interesting. I think I rated it 3.25 stars. And the other book that I finished that had me crying, If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. Of course, this book is an automatic 5-star. Honestly, this is one of what I would consider my 6-star reads. This book is just so beautiful, and something that I find quite funny is I would explain this as in I don't have the words for what I say, even though I love literature so much, which is a terrible paraphrasing for this quote on page 253. "I desperately wanted to, but my mind was blank. For someone who loved words as much as I did, it was amazing how often they failed me." And that is so real. For someone that reads and writes with every last breath in them, I honestly cannot string together sentences to save my life. Although I did that one in my first attempt, so maybe I'm getting better. This book, everything is intentional, and I think that oftentimes with books things can be written for the sake of having the writing, having a strange side plot that isn't linking back to the main one. In this one, like I said, everything is intentional, everything leads back to this main plot. Everything is so incredibly tragic and so incredibly sad, and again, I really struggle to describe the words for books that I feel like are within my soul. I think this one, as I think I've said 1,000 times over now, is just so representative of me and who I am as a person. I think that's probably why it was especially interesting to have read this with my annotations on the page as well. I know that I said on Monday that reading this is like having a conversation with the book and the characters, but also myself, in the sense that I'm reading my past experience, my past thought process. And it was so interesting to see that version of myself that was younger. I feel like it kind of mirrored Oliver and his flickering between the prologue of his present tense and then the acts and scenes of his past. I think it was really interesting to have that dual narrative, both of the characters and of myself. This book is honestly so crazy. That's about as much as I can explain. The themes I annotated on my first reread of this are academia, key quotations, tragedy and denouement, relationships, characterization on and off stage. So I think those are very central to the plot. And even though I'm finished with this book, I think I'm going to be thinking about it for a very long time. And I actually timed my reread of that perfectly because I am also now currently reading Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. I read some of If We Were Villains in the morning yesterday so that when I got back from seeing my flatmates in the evening, I only had Act 5 left to read. And of course in Act 5 the characters in If We Were Villains play Romeo and Juliet. So it was so interesting to see my annotations from If We Were Villains because there were some things I thought this would absolutely work as an annotation simply for Romeo and Juliet. I think the one that stood out to me the most is in Romeo and Juliet's first meeting with all of the religious imagery. Romeo talks more of sin and saints, whereas Juliet talks more of pilgrimage and prayer. So I think that could be quite an interesting interpretation that I desperately need to write down in my book. I'm currently on Act 1, Scene 1 of Romeo and Juliet, so I'm not that far in, but I do think my annotations for the prologue are quite good so far. Obviously my assignment is on the prologue, so I would like to do some more reading. I've got my seminar tomorrow, which I probably won't film, but I'm sure I will have some more things to write down. Something else I wanted to say about If We Were Villains is kind of linking to Romeo and Juliet. The fact that I've read more Shakespeare every time I reread If We Were Villains makes it feel even more familiar. I recognised Troilus and Cressida, the two gentlemen of Verona, of course now Romeo and Juliet. King Lear is in Act 5 and I don't think at the time of reading it originally I'd finished King Lear yet, so that was intense. Oh, and also, Oh Oliver. What? That makes me want to die when I read that, and I was like, wait, can I say that on YouTube? I don't know, that was intense, okay? But my plans for today, because I felt a bit sad yesterday and because we put up the Christmas decorations in the kitchen, I would like to decorate my room a little bit. I've got some fairy lights to put up above my bed, and have you guys seen those like Christmas tree stacks out of books? I've got some short books to make a tree. I've also got some erasure poems that I did in my workshop I think are quite cool and they match the colour scheme of my room. So I'm going to put these up by my bed, I think, just to have something, because I feel like when I film with my bed in the background it's really blank. After that I'm going into town with Connie and our flatmate Ethan, and we're going to go to the Christmas market. We're going to pick up some things and have a wander, then come back, and then me and Connie have got an event this evening with Inquire, which is the university's newspaper. We've got a writer coming to give a talk, and apparently he's got feedback for all of the editors, so I get to hear feedback from a writer on my section of the newspaper, which is terrifying, but it went really well. I'm not sure if I got to show you last week. Oh no, it wasn't even last week, it was the week before, but it turned out really well. I'm really happy with it, and I got lots of praise on how my section looked, and people liked my articles and my writer's articles, so it all went well. But for now, I'm gonna decorate my room and then go to a Christmas market. Hello, it is now Saturday, November 15th, and I haven't had much time to do reading this week. I feel November is a very difficult time for students in general, but I have had 3 assignments due over the last couple of days, so a lot of my time has been spent working towards those and submitting them. But I have got a little reading update that I can give you. Today I'm hoping to go to Spoons in town with Connie, and we're gonna get a hot chocolate or a latte or something and get a little bit of reading done. It's nice to have some time to just designate to reading and relaxing. We're giving ourselves this weekend to kind of do nothing, but I mean it's nearly 3 o'clock and it's already starting to get dark outside, so it feels like there's not as much time in the day anymore, which part of me loves and part of me feels really unproductive for. So I'm reading 3 books at the moment. This morning I started Only Dull People Are Brilliant at Breakfast by Oscar Wilde, and I love the fact that Oscar Wilde is so committed to the bit of appreciating art in all of its forms. I mean, the first page on this, we spend our days, each one of us, in looking for the secret of life. Well, the secret of life is in art. Yeah, it is. I think this one will also probably be relatively inspirational for me in terms of my poetry and also my creative writing in general. I would also like going forward to start setting some time aside every week to force myself to write and to get into a habit of it, because it is a skill to develop rather than something more intrinsic, which is something that I'm trying to get past. It's something that we talk about a lot in our seminars because that tends to be my standpoint for creative writing and especially poetry. But I'm just happy to have another Oscar Wilde to read. I'm currently on page 16, and these Penguin Little Black Classics tend to be around 50 pages. I think I might take the next 2 books with me anyway, just to have. I've got One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig, and I'm on page 78. I think that's something I need to start doing with my reading, is not starting a book when I've only got 10 minutes. Especially when it's a fantasy like One Dark Window, I need to get a solid chunk of the way through in one sitting to fall in love. I read the first few chapters of this, chapter by chapter, on different days, so I don't feel as connected to it, but now the characters are all kind of starting to meet and there is a plot going forward and I'm starting to understand the magic elements to it, so I'm enjoying it more. I will say that the way that Rachel Gillig writes a male love interest, or male characters in general, because I'm not entirely sure who the love interest is, I feel like every time a new male character is introduced, I'm like, yeah, he's the one for Elspeth, but the way that she writes these main characters, or the male characters, is hot, you know, like it is so good the way that she writes them. They are so attractive and so perfectly gothic as well. My favourite so far is Raven, and the way that his name is spelled as well, I love. I like it so much. I think it is so brilliant. I think the way that she writes the gothic elements and her characters and their interactions, and also these magic elements. Her fantasy plot lines are completely unlike anything I've ever read. The ideas of the dreamers and what are they called? I can't remember the exact name of them, but the women from The Night and the Moth. That was such an intriguing read. I've never ever read anything akin to that, but this one I feel I'm also going to really enjoy. I just need to set aside some time and get into it. If I can get to maybe like page 200 or something tonight, then I will be happy. So that's currently where I'm at with One Dark Window. And then the other book I'm reading at the moment is, of course, Romeo and Juliet. I know I said that I wanted to finish this before my seminar, but did I talk in my seminar? No. So did I read it? No. I did actually talk to my seminar leader briefly about my annotations, because during our break she saw my tabs and she went, oh, those are like lovely colours, where'd you get them? And I was like, oh, Amazon. And we were just talking a little bit about how I annotate and how much fun it is. I actually did annotate more on the first page, which was brilliant because my assignment was on the general prologue, which is why there is so much on this first page. And something that I really like that we discovered is from Tumblr is Connie is much more likely to talk in a seminar than I am, and she was talking about the prologue and the tragedy of Romeo and Juliet, and she said that there's this quote online, which is the thing from Tumblr, and it says, tragic because it didn't have to end this way versus tragic because it was always going to end this way. So I've written that up at the top of the page because I think that is so beautiful. And we also went through and we analysed the first act, the way that the men kind of come into the stage and disrupt this traditional love sonnet that actually was talking also about death and the comparison between that. We looked at the love-death nexus in our lecture. So I'm also taking Romeo and Juliet because I would love to fully absorb myself in Shakespeare. My goal for next year, I think, as in 2026, is to read a play by Shakespeare per month. If I can get like a solid collection of my Arden Shakespeares, that would be amazing. I would love to read them and reread them and be so intrinsically connected to Shakespeare. I want to live and breathe him and to get all of the references and make connections between them. And maybe this is because I just recently read If We Were Villains, but who knows, I would love to just blame Shakespeare for all of it. So there is where I'm at. Talking of annotations, I think when I get back later I'm going to do a brief how I annotate video like clip in here because I get asked on YouTube more than I do on TikTok. So I presume some of you guys don't have both platforms. So I'm going to film a segment for this video, I think, and then also a short to post, because that way it covers all my bases. I'll probably also post a short on TikTok and maybe Instagram, just so that everywhere is my annotation tutorial. I really am happy with the way that I annotate at the moment. I think it is really beneficial for me for the reading experience and for writing afterwards. Of course, writing is something that for me is so intrinsically connected to my reading experience that I would love to promote that and the engagement with literature critically. So if I can have any hand in talking about that and helping other people do it, then I'm all for it. So I think I'm going to do that later. I'm about to film a video for TikTok about my experience reading If We Were Villains, and then I'm going to have something quick to eat before me and Connie go out. So I will see you probably when I'm in the bar in Spoons with my hot chocolate. If we get in, I hope we get in. If not, I'll see you when I'm annotating, probably. So the light coming from it. Hey again. We didn't end up getting anything at Spoons because it was so busy, but we did get to see the Christmas lights that we went to see on Wednesday fully lit up, so it was quite nice. I read a little bit more of Only Dull People Are Brilliant at Breakfast on the bus, and I quite liked the idea that he wrote on page 21, religions die when they are proved to be true. Science is the record of dead religions. I think that's quite an interesting idea on the intersectionality between religion and science. I feel like the two are kind of normally put against one another, and I think it's interesting to look at this collaborative element that probably does exist between the two, and the idea that maybe religion isn't so much of a individualistic thing and it could just be seen as the hypotheses for science. So I think that was quite an interesting idea, reading on the bus, but it was Oscar Wilde, you know, I love Oscar Wilde, so I'm enjoying that. I was thinking I'll finish it tonight, but I think I'd rather leave it until tomorrow when I go into town. Obviously tomorrow I've got my volunteering, so I'm going to need a bus book that's small enough to fit in my bag. I'd also like to maybe buy a band top tomorrow. I'd like to get a Sleep Token shirt. I also read a little bit more of One Dark Window. I'm on page 86, so I've read another like 15 pages. I'm really enjoying it. It's getting to the point now that the plot has fully kind of started to immerse me. We're starting to get the ideas of conflicting parties in like this other society that they've got. And the magic and the fantasy elements are really interesting. I know I said that like in my last talking clip maybe 3 hours ago, but in my defense I've only read another 15 pages since, so I've not got much new to say except for the fact that I do really like Rachel Gillig's writing style. I'm really enjoying this. It is so far as good as I was expecting. So my plan this evening is to go in the kitchen in a minute for dinner. I think me and Connie are going to play a little bit of chess and do some reading. I'm going to take One Dark Window and Romeo and Juliet probably. And then I think we might also have hot chocolate and make our flatmate slash friend Ethan explain archaeology to us, because we're joining him on Monday for his archaeology lecture. So I would like to know some of the more basic information before going to the lecture. Archaeology and medieval inscriptions on like castle walls and things is something that I'm learning about for my personal learning curriculum, and I'll probably post a video on that on my personal TikTok account at some point, but I need to find more time to actually do my personal studying for it. But either way, we're hoping to go to this lecture on Monday, so I'm excited to have a bit of formal education on my informal studying, so I'm excited for that, but I need to know some more of the basics. For now, that is my evening plan. I'll film some clips of my hot chocolate and my books probably, and then I will see you tomorrow. Hey guys, it is Sunday, November 16th, so I'm going to give you my final reading update of the video. I've not read loads, but I have read something. So I finished reading Only Dull People Are Brilliant at Breakfast by Oscar Wilde, and I got to the magic quote, the Oscar Wilde one that everyone quotes. A dreamer is one who can only find his way by moonlight, and his punishment is that he sees the dawn before the rest of the world. And now the fact that I've read that on pages, reading that before the bus this morning was honestly kind of crazy. Like, I was like, oh, just like, what's the word, like a eureka, like awakening moment, I don't know, but that was crazy. I actually really enjoyed this book. I don't know, sometimes I struggle with the Penguin Black Classics, like the little ones, because they aren't so dense. They tend to be like a shortened version of, or an extract from a fuller text, so sometimes I struggle with liking them so much. I think I'd honestly give this 3.75 stars. The way that Oscar Wilde writes is so beautiful, but in this one it was so radical as well, and the differing ideas were so interesting, which I feel like I always say that's like my go-to, so interesting. But it really was, especially the ideas of religion and science and art, because obviously art is something that Oscar Wilde seems to use as his muse in a lot of his writing. I particularly enjoyed in this one the ideas of love and tragedy alongside art and nature, science, religion, anything like that. I think that was quite a nice new topic to discuss with Wilde, so I'm glad that I've read this. It's definitely something that I will go back and read multiple times and try and get something new out of it every time. I think it's easy to just flick through and find a statement or a quote that you really like and try and live by it for a bit, because it kind of reads almost like a radical prose poem in the way that it's short sections and short statements. So I really enjoyed it. And then I read some more of One Dark Window today. The fire alarm went off this morning at 6 a.m. and I had to be up at 8, so I did consider staying awake and just reading, and I kind of wish I did, but I didn't. I went back to bed. I'm at the point with this book now that I'm enjoying it so much that I don't want to do anything else. I just want to sit and stay in this book. The world is so brilliant, and the way that Rachel Gillig writes gothic romance is unbelievable. I love it. And also the relationship dynamics are so good right now. I stand by what I said about Raven earlier, so just know that I'm in love with him, and this could honestly be a 5-star book. I feel there is nothing so far that I haven't enjoyed, beyond the fact that it took me ages to get into it. That was also my own fault for reading 10 pages at a time for like 3 days, so there's no one to blame but myself, and I do blame myself because I'm loving this, and if I had just stuck to reading it more at the start, I probably would have finished it by now. But I'm just going to appreciate the fact that I can stay in the world for longer, is how I'm going to convince myself. Will I finish it tomorrow? Yeah, I feel like I probably will, but it's okay. I will inevitably post probably a full review of this duology on TikTok and Instagram. So that's where I'm at with this. I don't have any other reading updates, but I've got 2 other books I'm going to talk to you about. The first of which is this, like, honestly stunning collection of Wordsworth's poems. At my volunteering job today, we were looking at this and I was going to list it online, but it's completely annotated, which means we can't sell it online. And she just said to me, would you like to keep it? And I went, yes please, yes please, I would love to keep it. It is honestly, it's got that like old book smell, which I can never tell if I like or not, but there are so many annotations all over this. Let me find. I think annotated books are already so intimate. I quite like this page with a little flower on it. I think that's quite sweet. And that you can't really tell on the screen, but it is annotated and lots of things are underlined on this. I haven't fully looked through the list of poems that are in this, but I know it has got Lucy Gray, which of course, if you know anything about me, you know that I adore The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. It's like honestly one of my favourite movies of all time, and Tom Blythe is like my top male celebrity crush, and Rachel Zegler, I just love her so much. I watched Snow White for her, which I feel like shows my dedication. Let's see, I haven't read so much Wordsworth. I wish I'd read more, and now I will. I've read Tintin Abbey and extracts from the Prelude. The last book I'm going to talk about is Romeo and Juliet, but I'm going to talk about it in the context of annotating. I know I said I was going to give a annotation tutorial in this video. The first thing I do when I'm going to start a new book and annotate it, like I did with Romeo and Juliet, is Google themes, or if my friends have read it or my family have read it, then I'll text them and say, I've got a list of themes, can you please tell me if they're good? Can you give me any suggestions? Which is what I did with The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I texted my friends and said, I know you guys were arguing about this. This is my list of themes. Any thoughts? And then they gave me some additions. So I don't know if I've said this already, but my themes for Romeo and Juliet, I always, no matter the book, have important and memorable quotes as my number one thing to tab, because that is then what I will most likely go back to, and those are the things that kind of hit my soul and I would love to remember them. So those are always important and memorable quotes. Then I've got tragic elements versus fate, religious associations, Juliet versus time, domestic conflict, and overpowering love. The most fun bit that anyone can do is choose the colours. I always try and make my colours match the cover of my book, so obviously I've got like reds and pinks. It's not always 100% a match, but they look quite nice. And then I carry those around on a bit of plastic. I don't know, it comes when you buy the tabs normally. In terms of actually annotating, it does depend on the book. For something like Romeo and Juliet, these are my initial interpretations of the prologue form and the idea of surprise versus suspense. It's more difficult on a play like this because I don't write, I can't think of the dimension, I don't write going this way along the spines, I write kind of where the space is, because it just looks a little bit nicer in my opinion. I do also love using the post-it notes. They make it so much easier to express a large thought or a large interpretation, especially on a page like this where you don't get much space in the margins, because for the Arden Shakespeares, this bottom page here, the bottom half of the page, is context and explanations of word choices, because obviously it's Shakespearean. I know I only read this in my last reading vlog, but I think Frankenstein shows my annotation style very well. Again, I've got the tabs on the side. You can see that like that match the cover. And then I've got the title page, which is where I write the themes. So I like to do them in a nice gradient. I think they look nice together anyway, because obviously the colour section matches the cover. But then I just write the individual themes so that it's easy to access when I'm going through this bit here. My annotations on a normal book do typically look like this, so I go along the margins. I tend to underline most things. I don't highlight as much as I used to. If I do highlight, it's normally, this is a bad example, but I normally highlight for something that really stands out for the theme or something that I want to annotate. This is a really annotated page and I think it kind of shows everything quite well. So as you can see, I do tend to underline passages rather than highlight passages. Again, the post-it notes for the bigger thoughts and then writing along the margins. For this one, it's kind of a correlating idea, so there's a line and then another one, but I don't tend to, I know some people will do the line going along the margin for the passage that they want to write about, or they'll do like arrows in the margins. I don't really like the look of that so much. I do sometimes do it in my plays, but for general prose I don't tend to. So that is kind of my method to annotating. Of course it's all completely subjective and you can do it however you like, but I do get semi-frequent questions saying, how do I annotate? I will hopefully be posting more annotation videos on TikTok and Instagram. Because I like to research the themes in books before I do my own annotations, I would like to be able to contribute to people also finding themes. So I've started, especially in my vlogs and in my reviews posted on Instagram and TikTok, I'll either post a picture of my theme page at the start, or as I'm talking to do my review, I will list the themes, which I hope is really helpful because I find things like that really useful. So again, I would like to be the person I would like to see on the internet, so I hope that you get some use out of it. I'm hoping to do it more, and I think that is where I'm going to leave this video. I feel like I didn't read as much as I did in my What I Read in a Week as a uni student a couple of weeks ago, so potentially this one is more applicable. Like I've said before, November as a uni student is not for the weak, but I do love my course and I love my assignments, so I'm excited that I've done them. I'm excited for the ones I've still got to do. I'm only at university for 3 more weeks now, and I've got a couple more videos for whilst I'm at uni, and then I've got some video ideas for when I'm at home. I hope you liked this video. I hope you enjoyed all of the Christmas stuff. I'm so excited for Christmas. I think it's my favourite holiday, and the fact that everyone feels like so Christmassy this year really excites me. It makes me feel really nostalgic as well. I feel quite childlike in the sense that I'm just so looking forward to Christmas and everything that that encompasses. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you in my next video.